Austin, Texas. A spring morning. In her small apartment in downtown Austin, Michelle Tran wakes up to the gentle sunlight filtering through the curtains. She is a senior architect at a prestigious firm, known for her dedication and talent. Since childhood, Michelle has been the pride of her family, good at studying, obedient, and always ready to help others. Michelle is the eldest child in a Vietnamese family that settled in Austin in the 1980s. Her parents worked hard to raise 3 children. From a young age, Michelle was aware of her responsibilities, taking care of her 2 younger brothers, helping her parents with work, and studying hard to not let them down. After graduating from college with a degree in architecture, Michelle quickly rose through the ranks in her career. She spent most of her income supporting her family, from paying off her parents' debts to paying for her 2 younger brothers' tuition. Despite the opportunities to pursue her personal passions, she always put her family first. Despite being praised by everyone as the perfect sister, Michelle began to feel pressured. She realized that she was living up to the expectations of others, sacrificing her own happiness to maintain an exemplary image. The compliments gradually became a burden, making her feel tired and lonely. One day, when Michelle looked in the mirror, she saw a tired woman with lifeless eyes. She began to ask herself, "Who am I living for? Am I truly happy?" These questions made her rethink her life and her role in the family. She used to think, "It seems like no one has ever asked me if I like studying the subject, if I like this job, if I am tired or have any difficulties, if I have any special likes or dreams. Everyone seems to only care about whether I bring home a lot of money, pay off debts, buy things, and support my younger brother. In everyone's eyes, I have always been a good older sister, but with a very heavy responsibility. I just do things without thinking about the pros and cons, but it seems like my efforts are natural, not recognized, not encouraged. I thought my parents took care of and paid more attention to my younger siblings because they were young. I could be independent. But that feeling of being cared for and pampered is something every girl wants, especially when she has to face the pressures of life. Sometimes I feel lost, uncertain, not knowing who to rely on." Austin, Texas. A summer afternoon. Michelle is sitting in the office in downtown Austin, overlooking the bustling city. Despite her success in her career, she felt an invisible burden weighing on her shoulders. It wasn't the pressure of work, but the expectations and responsibilities her family had placed on her since she was a child. The phone rang. It was her mother. She asked about financial support for her youngest brother to buy a house. Michelle felt confused. She had helped her family a lot in the past, but this time, she wanted to think more carefully. Michelle began to question her role in the family. She had always been the one responsible, the one who sacrificed, but was that fair? She felt conflicted between love and the feeling of being taken advantage of. However, her thoughts were a bit shaky. She wondered if she was being too selfish. Was it normal to care for and support family members? She was confused and decided to see a psychologist to share her feelings. During the conversation, she realized that she had been living according to other people's expectations for too long, forgetting what she needed and wanted. After much thought, Michelle decided to talk openly with her family about her feelings and desires. She knew that this would not be easy, but she believed that she needed to be true to herself in order to find true happiness. Austin, Texas. One fall evening, Michelle returned home after a stressful day at work. She decided to clean up the living room in preparation for a family gathering this weekend. While dusting off the bookshelf, she discovered an old photo album that her mother had sent her a long time ago. Michelle opened the album and flipped through the pages. The photos were of her family on holidays, birthdays, and vacations. However, she noticed something strange. She was not in most of the photos. Instead, there were only her parents and 2 younger brothers. She felt a sadness rising in her heart. Michelle called her mother to ask about the photos. "Michelle, Mom, I just looked through our family photo album. I noticed that I was not in many of the photos." "Why?" "Mom, oh, I guess you were busy with school or work and couldn't attend. You know, you're always busy." Michelle's answer hurt her. She realized that, despite all the sacrifices she had made for her family, she was still forgotten in important moments. It was normal for her to not be there. They didn't need her. Maybe they needed something else. Michelle began to think about her role in the family. She had always been the one to shoulder the responsibility, sacrificing her time and energy to support her parents and siblings. However, she felt that she had never been properly recognized or appreciated. Michelle decided that she needed to change. She didn't want to continue living in a world of unappreciated sacrifice. She began to set clear boundaries with her family, say no to unreasonable requests, and take time for herself. Austin, Texas, a gloomy Sunday morning. Michelle woke up early. She brewed a pot of plain Colombian coffee as usual, but this time without music or email. She sat on the balcony, watching the gray clouds roll across the sky. In her hand was a notebook, a checkbook, recording all the money she had sent to her family over the past 12 years. The total, more than $186,000. And a separate note, "Love doesn't need receipts." She called her mother, her voice calm. "Mom, I'm not going to help Brian buy a house. From now on, I'm not going to support him anymore." The silence on the other end of the line stretched like a tear in fresh skin. Then her mother said, "So, what's left to call a sister?" Michelle replied, "I'm still your sister, but not your bank." She hung up. Her hands were shaking, but her heart was light. No more sisters if you don't provide money? It sounds ridiculous. Since when has sisterly love and family love been measured by money? It turns out that all along they needed her, the benefits she brought to the family. When she was no longer useful, she left without mercy. Michelle did something she had never done before. Booked a ticket to Colorado, alone, without telling anyone, without leaving a note saying, "Call if you need anything." There, she rented a small wooden cabin in the middle of the pine forest. Read books. Write a diary. Meet a woman in her 60s who was also the eldest child in a large family and who took 30 years to learn to say no. "You know," the woman said, "when you're always the model sister, you don't have a childhood. And when you wake up, your whole family says you're selfish. But if you're not selfish for once, you'll never be able to live authentically." When she returned, she printed out a photo of herself standing in the snowy woods of Colorado, the sun beating down on her coat. She framed it and placed it in the entryway of her house instead of the family photo that had hung there before. Below the photo, a small line read, "Family is not where you sacrifice to be accepted. Family is where you don't have to sacrifice and still be loved." Austin, Texas, a week after Michelle reset her boundaries. Her voicemail began to fill up. Messages from her mother, her brother, an aunt in San Jose she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Michelle, what you did was unfilial. Brian is very disappointed. If you don't help him get married, people will laugh at our family. You've learned so much and forgotten all your roots, right? She was silent. No response. No explanation. She had learned the most important thing from the Colorado trip. You don't need to justify yourself when you're protecting yourself. Family, or a collective hostage of your image. For years, Michelle had thought that if she did well enough, sacrificed enough, loved deeply enough, her family would understand. But now, when she stopped giving money, stopped being humble, all the loving words disappeared. There was only blame, labeling, punishing silence. She realized the family didn't need her as Michelle. They needed a docile version of Michelle. The first time they met again, at a wedding, 3 weeks later, Michelle was still invited to Brian's wedding despite being scolded before. She came in a simple dress, no makeup. No one approached. No one asked how she was. Only a glance from afar, from the father who had once said, "You are the pillar of this family." Now he quietly turned away. Michelle smiled faintly. She was no longer in pain. She only felt sorry for her past self. A stranger wrote to Michelle. The day after the wedding, Michelle received an email from her middle brother's ex-girlfriend, the one who had been disowned by the family because she was too strong-willed. "You don't know me, but I always remember you were the only one who stood by my side, silently. When I saw you daring to move out, I had the courage to move out. Thank you for showing me anyone can escape if they dare." Michelle burst into tears, not because of sadness, but because for the first time, she felt that the courage and strength to step out of the arms of those who called family had such meaning. Austin, Texas, a morning without an alarm clock. Michelle woke up at 7:43 a.m. without being called, without being asked for help, without having to rush to prepare a design board to submit on time. She made coffee, opened the balcony door, and felt the sun falling quietly on her shoulders. She sat there alone, but not lonely. For the first time in years, Michelle no longer felt indebted to anyone. Family knocked on the door, but she didn't answer it like before. The following month, her mother had a minor fall and had to go to the hospital. An aunt called, hinting, "If you don't come, you'll bring shame on the whole family." Michelle sent flowers, called the doctor, but she didn't come home. "I know you have someone to take care of you, and I need to be taken care of too, by myself." For the first time, Michelle understood, helping doesn't mean giving up peace. She sold her old apartment and bought a small house near a lake in suburban Austin. There, she started a weekend art class for children, something she had dreamed of but never dared to do because she was too busy being the breadwinner. She hung an oil painting she had done in the living room, a woman with her back to the ocean, letting a family photo drift with the waves. Underneath, she wrote, "Family is not a place that holds you back with guilt. Family is a place where you don't have to sacrifice yourself to be loved." One last email. Michelle to herself. Michelle at 11. Asterisk, I'm sorry for keeping you on your toes for so long. You don't have to be a model sister to be worthy of love. From now on, you're free to draw, without asking anyone's permission. Michelle is no longer the perfect sister in the old definition. She is a woman, strong, vulnerable, daring to love, daring to say no. And if anyone asks, "Where is your family?" she will smile, point to her heart, "Here, My family starts with me. 3 years after Michelle left the big sister role, Michelle, now 39, lives in a small lakeside house about a 40-minute drive from downtown Austin. Her life is as easy as the mornings, painting, working part-time as an art instructor at an art center, and teaching art to high school students on weekends. She rarely contacts her family, not because she is angry, but because she has chosen silence as her companion. Until one autumn afternoon, she receives a call from her aunt. Her voice is worried. Brian was arrested, involved in financial irregularities of the company. It's all over the news. Your mother fainted. Michelle sits still. The wind from the lake rustles through the reeds. She is not shocked, not happy, not gloating. She just takes a deep breath and calls back. 3 days later, Michelle returns to her parents' house. The familiar old house is now devoid of laughter, filled with a heavy atmosphere. Her mother was gaunt, sitting absent-mindedly next to the old tea set. When Michelle walked in, she looked up and cried. For the first time in her life, the Vietnamese mother she had always thought of as never admitting mistakes held her hand and choked up. I'm sorry. I put too much burden on you. I thought men shouldered the burden while girls endured well. I was wrong. I didn't pay attention to the hardships and fatigue you had to bear. I let my little daughter suffer too much. I'm so sorry. Michelle said nothing. She held her mother's hand, tightly but gently. The middle brother was also silent. Her father sat with his head bowed. After Brian was detained, the relatives stopped gathering. They realized Michelle had shouldered almost everything, and now no one could replace that role. She didn't blame anyone. But when her mother asked, "Can you come home for a while?" she smiled softly. I will visit often. But my home is somewhere else now. Michelle did not interrupt. She took her mother to the doctor, helped her father with the retirement paperwork. She still called to wish her grandchildren a happy birthday. But every time she closed the car door and returned to the house by the lake, she breathed deeply. She knew forgiveness does not mean returning to the old role. She forgave, not because anyone deserved it, but because she herself deserved peace. The new picture Michelle drew, a small woman standing in front of a tall mountain. At the foot of the mountain, a burden had just been put down. She wrote in small letters, "When I stopped carrying the burden for the whole family, no one died." The only truth that those who used to lean on must learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Everyone will find their own peaceful place. It can be a home with family members, or a home of their own, as long as they feel happy and free.